Hey, this is Dan with the Video Game Collecting Podcast. Hey, this is Dan with the Video Game Collecting Podcast. Today's special guest, Dan Gomez. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. People who don't know, Dan works on Modern Database, which is the opposite of what a lot of people do, because Modern is something I know myself, I don't know that well. And Dan, do you want to talk about, to kick us off, talk about the Modern Database and kind of what it is?
Sure. It's kind of a project I have going on right now that is basically a database that I created in what I do is I collect data on anything modern. And by data, I mean pieces of information on the games that can help us identify print runs, variants, that sort of thing. Because I feel like there's very little resources and information on modern at present day. I'm looking to kind of bridge the gap, I guess you could say, in knowledge of modern through that effort.
Well, that's awesome, because I feel like I know we wish we could go back and someone would have done that back in the NES days, so doing it now is the best time to do it. And that's awesome.
Exactly.
So first we'll go back to your origin story, start from the beginning, and we'll go back to Modern Database. But so what was your first game system?
I had a very brief experience with the NES, but by the time I had played it, it was the Super NES was already out. So I guess my first real console that I spent significant time on was a Super Nintendo. And I didn't play a whole lot of games on it. I played all the games everyone else did, like Mario, Donkey Kong. But there was a few others that, we didn't own the console. We had rented it from Blockbuster. So that was kind of neat. And one of the first games that I played, not first games, but like one of the biggest games that I remember playing was Earthbound. Yeah, just because I remember seeing the display box at Blockbuster, and it was like this massive, beautiful box. And I was like, man, I got to play that. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to get it. So I got it, and I loved it. So
that's awesome. No, and that's not a game I think everyone else played. I know I didn't play. I played all those same games besides that. So that's awesome that you had experience with Earthbound. And so what is your top system like that you're like, hey, you identify most with? Like, is it the Super Nintendo? Is it something more modern?
I would definitely say it's Xbox, and only because I have a lot of like the memories that I remember in gaming where life was easy and I didn't have a job. I could just come home after school and game was in the Xbox era. Original Xbox, Halo was like the game that everybody had, that you had to have on Xbox, right? And that was the game that I came home after school every day and played. So I would say my fondest memories in gaming when I was younger would have been on the original Xbox. So I would have to give it up to the Xbox, but I do have like my really early childhood memories on the Super Nintendo. So between the two, I think I would say.
Well, that's cool, because I mean, how you describe it, I think we all kind of remember when it's 2 or 3 o'clock and we couldn't wait to get home every day. Just we knew we could game for like 2 hours before dinner, before you had homework.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the shit, like
that
was the good times, because you didn't have to. There was no worry about it. It's just like, okay, I'm gonna get home. I have this game to beat. No, that's awesome.
Yeah, and you can at that age, I think you can. When you're a little older, you can learn to appreciate games a little more than when you're like really young, maybe like 6, 7, or whatever, 8. Like when you're in your early teens, you kind of have a better appreciation for video games, and as video games evolve as well, you can learn to appreciate them a little more.
Xbox is a great system, man. It's funny because I went the PS2 route. So when a little bit older, when I worked at Blockbuster, I had 2 friends that were Halo fans, and I never played Halo. I remember going to their house, and we had like 6 or 8 hours to burn, and we just played Halo the whole time. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. I was like, oh my God, where has this been? But I think like Halo 2 or something was coming out. One of the Halos coming out. So they were like staying up all night for the release, and I was just there to piggyback. But yeah, so you went through Xbox. What was after, what system do you have now? Xbox Is it X? I forget the name of it.
So yeah, the newest one is a Series X. Yeah, it's confusing as hell. But yeah, I still play from time to time. I don't always have time, but I am on the Xbox. I mean, I had a PS4 and everything. I had a PS2 back in the day also. Played a lot of PS2 games and stuff like that. But I've always been leaning more towards Xbox just because I felt like Xbox had the better online platform for online gaming. You know, I've tried both, you know, and I just personal preference, online gaming is better on Xbox. But
well, no, I played Xbox 360 was the last, I'd say, modern besides Nintendo. You know, I played and definitely enjoyed Modern Warfare and all that. But so what got you into Modern Database? Like, how did that start for you?
Well, it started, I don't know if you know, but I originally I was a full set collector. I collected full Nintendo sets. So I had like I started with Super Nintendo. I got like halfway done through the set, and then I started NES halfway through, and then I did Nintendo 64 right at the end. But in about 11 months, I did a full Super Nintendo set, like 50% of it was CIV. I did a full N64 set, and then a nearly complete NES set. I had like maybe 30 games left to go on the set. And at that point, I was like, I still needed stadium events, right? So I was like, do I want to spend, and this is when stadium events was still like 9-10 grand. And I was like, do I want to spend 10 grand on this one game? Or do I want to call it quits right now and just move on? Because I was getting burnt out. You know, I did it way too fast. So anyway, I did end up getting burnt out, and I ended up selling my sets. That's when I started becoming interested in collecting Xbox. And I guess that's where my modern interest started, was with Xbox. Yeah, so I started from there. I was, you know, I didn't intend to go for a full set or anything. I was just interested in collecting a few titles. But then I started becoming interested in collecting variants. And then from there, it just grew on to what it is now.
No, that's awesome. And do you ever regret selling any of those sets? Not financially, but do you miss it at all? You're just happy with your direction and happy where you're going? You feel, is this your spot? This is where you feel like this is your passion?
Yeah, I think so. I don't regret anything that, you know, I don't regret selling anything or whatever. It was fun at the time. I can appreciate it for what it was, you know, collecting the full sets. It was a little tough. I mean, I did it quickly, but finding Super Nintendo games with good, nice labels was tough, because a lot of those Mexico ones are pretty rough.
Majesco.
Yeah, the Majesco ones. So, but yeah, I don't regret anything. I think, and I'm comfortable here. It's kind of a tough, researching the modern stuff is tough because there's just so much of it out there, and you can't really look this stuff up, right? Like, there's no one to turn to get this information. You got to find it yourself.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's your goal with the database? If we fast forward in a year or two, what does it look like? Like, what are you doing? What are you working on? What's been completed?
I don't have like a clear plan in terms of like, you know, whether it's something that I'm going to throw on a website or whatever. I have just been slowly putting the information out there, like on my Instagram, putting whatever data I have. I mean, it's a small snapshot of the data I have, because when I collect data, I literally record every single detail about the item. And that's how you can differentiate print run sometimes, is like you record one game and you notate, okay, did it have a TM? Did it have an R? What type of Nintendo quality, seal quality did it have? And then you just look at tons and tons of copies until you find one that's different. And that's really the only way. So to go back to what you asked, I don't have like a clear plan whether like how I'm going to release all the information or whatever. But my main focus right now is actually gathering the data.
Mm-hmm. Now, so is there a direction of how you go of like, is there like a game by game, or are you looking at a bunch of titles, like what pops up? How do you go about what data you're collecting and how you approach it?
Good question. So I start with the most popular titles first. Across all consoles. So, and it's starting from PS2, original Xbox, GameCube, and then up from there. I start with like the Marios, the Zeldas, and then going up to like PS3, PS4. We've got, you know, Last of Us. We got, you know, your Skyrims. You got, you know, there's so many different titles. So I start with those first. I start with the ones that are most relevant, and then go from there. Obviously, there's a vast amount of titles out there in modern. I can't do it all myself. I'm hoping that with what I'm doing, it'll motivate more people to hop on board and take it to the same level that I'm taking it. And you know, that way we can find discover more information that way.
Oh, that's a good point. And I think yeah, one person can't do it all. I mean, it's just, and especially even a handful of people, it's going to take, and I think as it grows, that's why I always like growing the community, is because you get more passionate people that can take on tasks like that with you. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
That's the crazy thing that I know people like, oh, might think I'm BSing about community, but I really do mean it, where it's like, I want more people here, because more people researching, really digging into this stuff, because if you weren't doing it, it might not be done. Like, it really might not ever be done.
Right.
So
yeah, exactly.
Awesome. No, it's so what are you working on right now? Is there a certain title that you're honing in on?
I just finished The Last of Us, and that was tough. There's a lot of different variants on that one, especially Canadian variants. There's a lot of like not for resale stuff, and I spent hours and hours kind of researching, because I was like, one thing is to know what's out there, and the other thing is to know why it's out there, right? So if you come across 4 different not for resales variants, why are there 4 different not for resale variants with unique UPCs or different variances in them? Is it because one of them is later than the other? Is it because one of them came in this bundle and this other one came in this other bundle? These are the types of things that you just can't look up. Like, you have to really, like, what I had to do is I looked up YouTube videos from 2012 of some random kid opening up his Last of Us bundle on YouTube. Doing an unboxing and hoping that he shows the back of the case in the video.
Wow, that's awesome.
So that's the level of research that it kind of takes to do that, and it's I'm not gonna lie, it's mentally taxing. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of tedious. It takes a lot of time. It takes all that, but when you do find the answer, it's worth it.
Mm-hmm. I remember one time. This is with those, I had some prototypes that were fake. And long story short, I was talking to Frank about them. He was like, hey, do you have any more information? And long story short, I ended up talking to the person I bought it from. He mentioned someone that he went to a swap meet, blah, blah, blah. And I had to watch a YouTube video for 2 hours. And I found the exact moment when the guy bought them in a store in Mexico City. It was so cool watching like
videos. You know what? I think I remember you telling that story somewhere. I think on
probably on here, but it was just funny that you have to be, it takes a lot of time. You're like, and that was that rewarding part you mentioned, like, yes, there it is. Like, it was like the last video I was gonna watch. I'm like, I'm freaking done with this shit. But no, that's awesome that you have the passion, but also the reward from completing it. I'm glad that you're doing it. I like to call the Canadian variants the Dan Kaplan variants, just to be clear. But no, that's cool. So what's the next one you're working on? So you just got done with The Last of Us. What's on the horizon?
There's a bunch that are kind of in limbo right now, just because the thing is, I don't like to publish any information unless I can really get a grasp of what I'm kind of showing. So I don't like to show incomplete information. So I'm not going to, so right now I'm doing like Wii Sports, Mario Kart, there's a lot of Wii titles that people are curious about. And I'm getting a lot of DMs of people saying like, oh, can you do this next? Can you do that next? And I'm like, all right, I'll try my best. But, I've got a bunch of other ones that I'm working on. Skyrim is a monster, especially on 360. There's so many variants on that one. And
how do you start? Like, let's go through the process. You decide, hey, I'm going to try Skyrim. What's the first step? I mean, would you just kind of look what's on the market, notate them, and try to see where to put them, and then see the gaps? Or how's that work? Because that kind of seems, that's the hard, I mean, what I'm thinking about when you want other people to help is kind of to give them an idea of how would they go about looking at this? Like, do you make a template? How's this kind of go about?
That's a good question. It does take some prior knowledge to kind of make sense of it. And it's very console specific, right? So like when you think of collecting information on like Skyrim on PS3, it's going to be different from Xbox, just because PS3, they had like, the Black Label, and then they had Greatest Hits. Well, then for Xbox, like they had the standard release, and then they had bestseller, and then they had Platinum Hits bestseller, then they had Legendary Edition bestseller, and then Connect, and there's just so many different things. And in order to understand maybe where they fall in the print run order, you kind of have to know that console. You can't just, there isn't a template out there right now that shows, okay, if it's this, it's that. If it's this, it's that, right? So you kind of have to have prior knowledge of that console before you can do that.
Do you think in time after you've done enough of them that there might be able to make some kind of, if it's this, it's that, if it's this, it's that? Is that possible? Is it just too sporadic?
I think maybe in a general sense that could happen. But when I see this question a lot, people will say, how do I know whether a game is first print? As a general sense.
Like,
and I say it's based, yeah, exactly. It's based, it's game specific. You can't just say on all PS3 games, this is how it's a first print. No, you can't do that. It's very game specific.
Well, so my question for that, because let me be clear, say PlayStation 3, zero clue. Like, let me be clear, zero clue about anything there. I mean, is there 5 different ways it could be first print? Is it 10? Is it just way too many? I mean, I have no clue. So I'm kind of curious if there's maybe 50% are like this and then 20% and it's a few here, a few there. Or...
You can kind of hone it in a little bit. If it's just like a black label, that's where you're going to find your first prints, right? If, your black label first prints, because the way that I think of it is that, you have like your standard release black label first prints, and then it goes on to greatest hits which would be like the second edition. And then there's a greatest hits first print, and there's greatest hits second print. That's the easier way to think of it, because it gets too convoluted when you start trying to mix in black label and greatest hits together, and then calling those like, oh, this is the black label's first, and then greatest hits is second, and then the next greatest hits third. It gets too complicated. So,
well, let's push away all the greatest hits and all that. I'm talking black label, put all that stuff away. We know people want to know about the first print. And so you see a black label. What are some of the big tells? You're like, hey, say the earliest releases. What were the big tells to tell their first print, or there's too many to even go over?
I think there's too many. It depends on the platform. So for Wii, we want to look at the country code. So if it's a 50 country code, then you can say that it's a first print Japan, but it's not always the case. Like PokePark, right? How we had that 50 country code, which should be a first print, but it's got a white ESRB, which means it was released in 2013, which would not be a first print. It's actually a reprint. So it's messy, man. It's very messy.
Let me touch on that real quick, because we were in Clubhouse this last week or 2 weeks ago with one that game went for something like 20 grand and went off, and Dan's in there just going, hey guys, this is second print, and we're all like, what? Like, no one knew besides Dan that, like, this is second print, and we're like, yeah, and we're all just like, how do you know this? So yeah, that was really cool, I have to mention.
Yeah, that took a bit to actually even know that information, because the only way that I knew that ESRB had changed in 2013 was from collecting data on all of these different titles on all these different consoles and saying, oh, that's interesting. Why did the ESRB change to white in 2013? And I noticed that on all consoles, not just Wii, whatever Wii U. It's 360, it happened on 360, it happened everywhere. So when I saw that on the Wii PokePark, I was like, wait a minute, okay, this one's black, this one's released in 2010, this one's white. ESRB came out in 2013, or was introduced in 2013. So this is the second print. It just makes sense.
Well, you do know why all of them change when that happens, right? Because ESRB is a trademark, actually. I learned this last week, that it's trademark. So when they say do this, it's done this way, So
oh, right. Yeah.
It's interesting. I didn't know that was trademark, because I thought it'd be cool to put that on some t-shirts, like mature, like,
yeah, no, there is
18 or older to play, or whatever, 18 or over. No, I just thought it was interesting when you said that. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. If you know the ESRBs and what their designs were across the platforms per year, you would. And none of us knew that besides you, so you get the trophy. That knowledge paid off.
I get my cash prize. Where's my cash prize?
Your cash prize was 19,000. You have to go to that buyer or seller. And no, that was really, it was really showed what how important that modern data is. And I think to me it was really cool to kind of be in a moment where you're the one person that sees that. I mean, I'm not saying there's not anyone else, but no one else in that room of 20 some odd collectors that buy and sell daily. You know what I mean? So to me, it kind of showed where most people are lacking. Where you're putting your passion.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I mean, like, I don't mean to sound like some sort of elitist or something that I know it all or whatever. It's just a lot of collectors that even I know that are really dedicated, hardcore collectors in specific consoles don't go as deep as I do, and I don't blame them for it. It's just because maybe it takes someone that introduces that sort of deep knowledge to get them interested. Maybe they didn't know that if you look that deep that you can find more information, right? And maybe that's something that I can do is kind of entice people to become interested in researching that deep.
Well, it's really cool because I mean, I do think modern is just starting to get the respect it deserves. You see it in the weeklies, you see it in the auctions where money shows respect. I think it just people, if they're showing respect by spending a lot of money on them, and I think that knowledge is needed now more than ever. And before, I think people were just like, oh, when they're all $20, no one cares. But they're going for thousands. People are like, oh yeah, second, third print, yeah,
yeah.
They don't want to make that mistake, but no, it's really cool. I really think it's something neat. And yeah, so my question is if there was a system for you to track all the variants, would it be Xbox? Would that be the one you'd like to conquer? Or would you like to do another system? If someone's like, hey, you have to sit down and this is the only thing you work on for a year, which system would it be?
I would say one of the Nintendo ones, just because either Wii or GameCube, Wii, maybe Switch. Switch would be great.
Switch would be crazy.
Yeah, it would be crazy because I like the way that Nintendo makes it maybe a little bit easier to track down print runs because they have not only do they have the UPC, but they have a country code, they have a product code, they have the Nintendo part number. These are all things you can look at. Whereas Xbox, you just have the UPC and then you're not even guaranteed the product code. Sometimes you just have the UPC and that's it, and that's all you have to work on. And then you're stuck kind of just looking at minor differences in the paragraphs. Okay, are these paragraphs the same? Are these screenshots the same? Is the spacing on the paragraphs the same? Did they change it? Did they change the wording? Did they change the font style? These are all little things that you kind of have to look at for print run level research. So yeah, if I had to sit down and do one, it would probably be like GameCube or Wii.
I like the idea of Switch. I mean, I'm not telling you to do a full, but like Switch seems like a very collected system. Like people love the Switch, like with passion.
Right.
And so it's always like interesting when I see a wall of Switch games. It's like they spend a lot of money on that because like Switch games are never cheap yet. So like seeing a wall of Switch games, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of money on a wall. We think we spend a lot of money sometimes and you're like $50-$60 per game. It's pretty intense.
Yeah. I mean, I would love it if someone sat down and just did Switch because it's ever expanding because new Switch games are coming out all the time. So when you think of modern, the library comparison between like vintage and modern is just so great. Like modern is ever expanding. There's new modern games coming out even today, hundreds. So to have someone just go through and do everything is impossible. You have to have like thousands of people working on different consoles that deep to like really understand the print runs. And something I like to think about is when people say, oh, well, modern, it's abundant. There's a ton of it out there. I see it all the time. I've seen cases of it or whatever. Well, I say, what did you see exactly? Did you see the first run of it? Did you see the second run of it? Did you see the third or the fourth? Because to the regular person, it might just seem like, oh, that's a black label. There's tons of those out there. It's just a black label. But as we are coming to find out, there's actually more than one printing in a black label on a lot of these different consoles. So, there may not be as common as you think in certain printings.
Mm-hmm. Especially if it's first print. And then everyone's going to want that where there's only a handful. Maybe there's a lot of a certain print and none of the rest of them. So that's interesting. An interesting thought is if there's people right now actually doing Switch and we just don't know because, they're a lot of times they're younger, people that are really into it, that have the time to, because that'd be a tough one. Hundreds of releases a day. And a lot of these limited editions and premium editions and Chrome edition. No, that's cool. So with your personal collecting, what are you going after right now? I mean, it's modern still, but what are you just kind of going for a few titles? What are you doing?
As far as collecting, I'm mainly kind of going after stuff that I missed, in basically stuff that I played when I was younger that kind of meant a lot to me. So you've got like your Skyrims and Oblivion and stuff like that, games that I spent a lot of time on. I'm collecting variants for that. But as far as like collecting just stuff that I never played, I'm not big into collecting that type of thing. But anything that I played back in the day, I'll buy it. But it's mainly modern stuff right now.
Oh, that's cool. It's funny. My father-in-law and my brother-in-law played a lot of Skyrim. I've never played the game, but I know that's like the one where years of life have been spent.
Oh, for sure.
One day I'll get to it. There's just so much time. I could try to play them all, but so Skyrim's one of them. Is there something that in 10 years time you look back at your collecting or even your research, is there something you hope to accomplish that you haven't accomplished yet? Like if it's a certain guide, if it's getting Oblivion, is there something if you look back in 10 years, you're like, I'll be disappointed if I don't do this one task?
That's a good question.
I know I'm throwing curveballs at you, but
no, that's a good question. I don't know if there's any one thing, but I guess just to get the information out there, doing the research and stuff, it's fun for me. Even though, it is, like I said, it is taxing, but it is rewarding at the same time. So if I can at least get people interested in collecting for modern, I think that would be sufficient enough for me. If I miss out on a sealed game that I had as a kid or whatever, it's not the end of the world. I tell people, I collect data and information. I don't, if I can't collect physical games, I'm fine with that.
Well, I like to look at this time period in video games is really important. I know people would say that I've been in it for 20 years, like, oh, back then was important, but I still think we're so early in this hobby that the knowledge now, people will be like, this knowledge is not documented and it gets harder every day, especially like if there's people out there with the knowledge that worked at Nintendo and stuff like that. It's a ticking time, so I really do appreciate what you do there. And it's not usually it's a thankless task unless Johnny did the good shout out the other day, which was cool.
No, yeah, you too, man. I appreciate the shout out on the podcast.
No, honestly, cool. I think there's people that do a lot of hard work, and people that get heard of are the people that sell games for $1 million or something. But the people doing all the hard work, which some people make the money on the back of, kind of go thankless sometimes. So again, thank you. No, it's true though. Like people working hard for the knowledge, and then like other people are just using it to only, I think I have no problem with people reselling, but I do think we all should work together. It doesn't have to be all money and stuff like that, but for the community, it is a community. It's important to give back, not financially, but actually just literally how can you help in the community? And what you're doing a great task there. And I think people are starting to notice and will continue to notice, and not just because of the value, but I think a lot of people that played those games are now coming in being like, hey, we want Skyrim, we want Fortnite. I guess Fortnite's popular now. I'm just kidding.
No, you know what? The funny thing about Fortnite is I used to be the biggest Fortnite hater like ever. Like I had a friend, we call him Fortnite Frank because he plays Fortnite all the time. His name's Frank, of course. And I used to hate on him so bad. I was like, oh, you like playing that game with 9-year-olds, huh? Like you're just,
We did the same thing with a friend.
Yeah. So I used to make fun of him so bad. And then I finally was introduced to it. I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm bored. I'm going to give it a try. And boy, was I wrong. That game is so fun. I had to message.
There's games like that good. I'm like, if I play, I'll just like not go to work.
Yeah, it's addicting, man. It's a great game. They do it differently than any other game. And I messaged my buddy after like 2 or 3 years of like giving him shit for playing that. And I'm like, dude, I'm so sorry. I was wrong.
Yeah, we have one friend, usually today's Thursday. We used to play poker every Thursday night up to like once the vaccines came out, everyone got busy, but he would come and we always make fun of him like, hey, were you just playing with the 9-year-olds, Fortnite and all this other stuff. But no, I've known it's a good game. It's same thing with World of Warcraft. My brother used to like yell and stuff like that. I'm like, I'm glad I haven't touched the keyboard on that because I would be worse than him about
for sure
not leaving my room for 5 days. Warcraft 3. I played Warcraft 3 and being there's an end after 45 minutes was important because
Yeah, man, those games are a huge time suck. You kind of lose track of time for sure. But I had the same issue with Minecraft. So that was sort of the same thing. I was like, oh, that's a little kid, that's a little kid's game. That's a game for kids or whatever. And my cousin finally was like, oh, you want to hop on Minecraft with me? And I was like, sure. And then next thing you know, I'm playing that thing every day for like a week straight. And it's a fantastic game. I mean, because I was kind of turned off by the graphics, like the blockiness of the game. But that game just goes to show you that like you can use your imagination, like to your imagination makes up for the lack in graphics. Like it's a great game. People do some crazy stuff in that game.
I haven't tried it, but I mean I've seen it, and it's nothing against the game. I just haven't tried it. There's just certain games I'm like I haven't sat down and had that moment, and eventually I will.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's not for everyone, but it's worth a shot. I mean, it's the only thing I can recommend is to give it a shot.
Oh yeah, no, I completely have respect for it, and it's just during the time when that stuff came out, that's when I started having kids and stuff. So I had to stick to like the classic, the Nintendo Switch. At that point, it was one system. No, and that's where there's so many great games coming out today. Funny because I'll play some indie games like Celestial, or there's another one. And I love the 2D, and like Celestial was an amazing game. If you haven't played it, I think it's like $15 on the Switch.
Okay.
And it's I'm pronouncing it Celestial, and it's just it was a independent game kind of thing that just blew up, and it's very simple. It reminds you of an NES game, and it was fun. I have to play games that you could hit pause now because of kids. Like I get too pissed off at my kids. Like if I'm playing a game that I can't pause, I'm like, get away from me.
Yeah. I don't have that problem, luckily, but I can.
No, it's a problem not to have. Trust me. No, I'm kidding. But no, I mean, I'm glad that with modern, I mean, even myself, like there's so many titles, like even Fortnite, I highly respect, and people are starting to show it love. I mean, that's a multi-$1,000 game now.
Oh yeah,
would have rolled their eyes even a year ago.
I was watching one the other day. Well, not watching because it immediately sold, but some guy threw one up on eBay for $5,000, and it went immediately.
Damn.
So for the PS4 version. So
is that the more popular? I don't know which one.
They both sell pretty well. I think the Xbox one, I think it sells for around 2,000 right now.
That's pretty solid.
Yeah,
that's a few dollars. No, and that's important, is like that they're getting that respect, and it's important that it is one of the most popular games in the world, and especially with esports, that I feel like a lot of the people that have been collecting for a long time don't realize how popular esports are, and even know what esports are, like what it is. Like hundreds of thousands of people watch people play video games,
right?
And people make their living. I mean, one of the collectors in his hobby I know was a professional player, which is you're like professional player, like gets paid to play, and that's
awesome.
Yeah, I think we all grew up saying I want that job.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. I think that video games as a whole I'm surprised that video games as a whole took this long to become noticed and appreciated to this level, because I see it as the ultimate art form, right? Because not only is it art in the form of storytelling, but it's also art in terms of visual art. So you have like the cover artwork, and then you have art within the game, you have environmental art, and then it's art in terms of music. You have some of these insane masterpieces of music within the game. Skyrim comes to mind, where it's just a beautiful soundtrack. If you've never listened to the Skyrim soundtrack, I recommend you do. Or like Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy 13 was like one of the first Final Fantasy games that just had like just an amazing orchestral score that was just amazing. It had, was different from any other Final Fantasy game in terms of music. So like you have this all encompassing art form that's interactive, and you don't get that from comics. You don't get that from cards. You don't get that from any other thing. You have everything in one package. And the fact that it's like one of the last things that are becoming appreciated is crazy.
No, it definitely is. It's funny how we can spend months on a single game and not think to collect it. Like in a way, like, you know what I mean? Like it's like I just think it's the age of people that are, we're finally getting at the age where people collect, like will put money towards it. And I think that confidence, I've said confidence of knowledge, which you contribute to, makes it so people have a foundation to, collect. Because if they don't know what they're collecting, they're just gonna be like, what's the difference between an open copy and a sealed copy? A piece of plastic, I could put a piece of plastic on a game. Then they have to learn about why we're not just guessing what someone can't just wrap in their basement. No, I mean, a line that I really do believe, that knowledge is the foundation in which collecting is based on. I mean, if you don't have that foundation, you're never going to collect. You're not just going to spend money without knowing what you're buying. So, and it's not about the money, it's more about the collecting. People will not collect without that knowledge. So what you're doing is a valiant effort. I truly believe that. And I know that sounds corny, but I do believe it's very important for future people to collect once that they will collect once that knowledge is out there for them to stand on. So thank you. I know I've kind of saying thank you quite a bit, but I really do mean it, because I mean, there's people can go and buy and sell $100,000 games. Well, it's self-interest in a way, and what you're doing is kind of a bit different. And even myself, I really don't know shit about Modern and want to, so I thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't say that it's all for it. I'm doing the best that I can on my own right now. Like, I don't have anyone that's willing to dig that deep with me right now. I have a lot of friends who are very dedicated collectors, but in order for me to, like, I guess, show them how to research that deep would take time away from me doing research. So it's just kind of like a tricky situation. It took me like the first whole year of me collecting data was just me messing up. Like, it was like, I was collecting all this information, right? And then I was like, oh, I forgot to note this. So then the data that I have is invalidated now because I didn't note this, and this could have been different from this copy or this other copy that I looked at. So the whole first year, they've been working on this for about 3 years. The whole first year was a trial and error, right? So kind of messing up, fixing my mistakes. And then the last 2 years have been more so like, okay, I know what I need to collect data on. I know what I need to record. Now let's build this thing. Let's have all this on record and then go from there. Now we can use this data reliably to, and analyze it and to come to some conclusions.
No, that's awesome. I know this can be a really shitty analogy, but I kind of going to the gym. Like, when you first go to the gym, when you haven't been in years or anything, you're like, why am I here? I don't know what I'm doing. You just feel worse about yourself, and you're failing a lot. You're just failing a lot. That's just what it is. But as you keep at it over time, you start not hating it as much and a little bit enjoying it and find a routine. And then you're actually succeeding. I feel like you're at the part where you're past all the bullshit, where you have a routine of really getting that knowledge down and know what you're doing and being a pro at it. You have to fail. You can't learn as much if you don't fail. Like, failing's the best way to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, then I agree. Different ways to look at it. Like, okay, how do I not skip that next thing that I might not be thinking about and stuff like that. But
it definitely takes, trial and errors, seeing what you messed up, what you missed, fixing that, and then moving on. And the more data points that you collect, the longer it takes per title to look at, to analyze. So, like, you look at a game, before you were just looking at the UPC and the product code, and now you're looking at everything, and it's taking you 10 minutes just to look at one game, or 5 minutes to look at one thing. It's definitely time consuming, and but like you said, you gotta have a passion for it, and that's, I guess I have a passion for it,
right?
Passion and that. Exactly.
Well, no, I really want to thank you for coming on. And if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way of doing so?
You can reach me on Instagram at Modern Database, or you can use my personal Instagram, super_Nintender. That's going to be the best way.
I mean, I think you have to switch your name to Super Modern, but that's just.
Yeah, people keep telling me that when I was doing Xbox, be like, oh, you got to change it to Super Xboxer, or something like that, and I'm like, I'm just going to keep it. I can't change it every time my interests change. So
That'd be funny. Every time have a different name. No, but I really
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on, and thank you for what you do. And any last words of what you got going on, how the community, what's happening with your collecting, all that fun stuff.
not too much. I mean, I've got some pretty juicy information and about data or about print runs coming out. So stay tuned for that. Follow me on Instagram, and you'll see it there first, I guess.
I was hoping you'd say, "Hey, I got some juicy blackmail on Josh Byerly."
Oh, that too, actually.
Okay. Well, we collaborate with Matt Rose to get it, so it's all good.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, watch out, Josh.
Last question is, what do you recommend for someone that's getting into this hobby and wants to collect modern? Where would you, and say they're interested in print runs and maybe ones you haven't followed, how would you tell them to go about learning on their own about prints and how to collect them?
Well, I'm always open. I try to respond when I can. So you can come to me for questions if you'd like, and I can try to steer you in the right direction. But a lot of it is going to be just pay attention to detail. If you're looking at a copy or a game that you want, and you're not sure if this is like an earlier run or something, maybe just start doing your own research and look at other copies on eBay. So like what I do is I just go scan all the copies on eBay and I say, okay, well, are there any differences in all of the copies that are for sale or that have sold? And say, okay, so now I see some differences here. Why are these things different? Are they because it's just a different variant, or is it because one came before the other? And sometimes that's what it takes. And if the information's not out there yet, then you kind of have to just do that. But if the information's out there, the problem is that there isn't a central hub to find this information. And I would love it if there was a central hub for finding print run information for all modern, right? So right now, you just
website coming up. I'll talk to you after about it.
Is it yours?
Yeah, no, we'll talk about it after. That's like 1.5, but we'll talk about it after.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things we plan to, when I say I plan to do is, and the only reason it's not getting put into the first phase is just because we're running out of time to add anything new, is to do a overall database of every game that you can filter by variant and filter by sets, licensed, unlicensed, whatever, but also that anyone can add any variant to that list. It'd have to be looked over and approved, but it's kind of like a Wikipedia that, like, say you pull up Oblivion and you have a list, someone's like, hey, no, there's one other one on this list, they can add it, and that way you could research the game, pull up the information. The only hurdle is just time, and that's why I say 1.5, just because we're coming out in 2 months, and as much as I'd love to, we got to focus on the core of the marketplace first, but we're doing knowledge, but that part of it is just going to be a little bit later. So we'll talk after about ideas and how to make it great, but it's, I hate plugging anything in here, so that's why I like trying not to mention. I'm like, no,
it's your show, man. You can do whatever you want.
Oh no, we'll cut that part out. But no, but again, I really appreciate you coming on, and really, people reach out to Dan, try to help him on his mission, and not just his mission, our mission. It's about the community helping each other to collect this data and also just learn, have that passion. So thank you, Dan, for coming on the show. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And as always, enjoy the hunt.